All right, everyone. Hello and welcome back to yet another interview at Renegade Con. I'm your host, Chris Whipan. I am joined today if you've been around Renegade and you've been around our conventions, you've been around anything we do, we love to get Banana Chan on, and I thought that we should talk to her and get to know her a little bit better because she's like everywhere, right?
Yeah, I hang out around Renegade a bit.
Exactly. It's so what exactly would you kind of classify your role with Renegade as, for instance?
So I currently do a lot of writing work for Renegade. So I've done stuff for Kids on Bikes, writing modules for Kids on Bikes. I've done writing for Terror Below. I wrote a short story for that. And most recently, I worked on Warp's Edge. I did a little short story for that, and also the book names for. I always mess up the name.
Athenaeum.
Anthemium. Athenaeum, that's it.
You should have seen me typing it. It took somebody got me to actually it was Terry told me she's like Athens, and I'm like, oh, after that it was fine. It stuck.
That makes sense, yes.
But I was adding in ends all over the place. It was Anthonynium at one point. It was some new exotic metal. No. But you wrote like all these book names, and they're really fun and clever. And if anybody follows you on Twitter and things like that, and I think maybe even like I think I may have seen something very, very recently where you're like, if you need dad jokes, I'm your person. Because like dad jokes and puns is definitely where you seem to have a little happy spot.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely do a lot of random puns lately. That's been a thing.
Nothing wrong with that. I enjoy good puns. I think it's the sign of a sharp wit.
I like to think so too.
Yeah, says people who tend to say puns a lot. Trust me.
Yeah.
So, what? How did you kind of get your start? Because you did mention that you do a lot of things, and I mean, I don't know that I ever would have said, "Hey, let's outsource writing book names." How do you like find jobs doing things like that? Like, how did you get started doing that?
So I got my start in games writing in general when I submitted a game to the Golden Cobra Challenge. So this is a LARP challenge, which
Okay.
is like this experimental thing. They're short LARPs. I wrote two games. One of them got an honorable mention the first year, and then the second one won an award the second year. And so after that, that game got picked up by a publisher, and that got published into an anthology of games. And from there, just a whole bunch of my friends and like other people have reached out to me for odd jobs in writing, and that sort of just exploded from there.
So, when you say writing, are we talking about like writing characters and backstory, or is it just kind of flavor text or
Yeah, so I would say it's a combination of both. For me, I write a lot of short stories, flavor text, occasionally, stuff for RPGs as well, so modules, setting stuff, world building stuff, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And there's definitely like a lot of different kinds of jobs that you can find in writing in games, like whether it's mechanics writing or, you know, fiction writing, but not as like heavy as like a full on novel.
Right?
But yeah, there's like a lot of different things that you can get into.
Really, as a person who I like to think I have an imagination, but writing just never works for me. How would you how would you tell somebody to who is interested in kind of becoming a writer? What kind of path would you try and tell them to work towards?
I would usually say if you're trying to figure out like what kind of stuff you want to write about, look at your favorite movies or TV shows or books or, YouTube that you like to watch. or podcasts that you like to listen to, like the stuff that you already consume. That sort of
Hmm.
gives you an idea of what you might be interested in, and anything that you have an interest in might be a good thing to write about.
Awesome. So you've you have since started your own company, and it's called Game into Curry.
Mhm.
And I'm really interested to know where the name comes from because I love curries, so there's that. But where did that? What was the anthology of that?
Game and a Curry actually started off as a blog. It was me and my partner Herb, and we wanted to write about games that we went to. So we would pair restaurants with games, and we would go to restaurants and play the games, and we would write about it. And then from there, it sort of turned into this thing where, a bunch of our friends were like, "Hey, we have all these games that we're playtesting, and we're trying to find a publisher, but we're not sure where to go from there. Like, why don't we publish it? Let's just try this out." And that's sort of how it happened.
Interesting. So it's I love the idea of like pairing games with food. So did you ever have like what kind of stuck out as one that you remember the most from that series?
Oh, like a restaurant or like a food type?
Either the food or the game for that matter. Like what was one that kind of jumped out and went, you know
Oh,
what?
wow.
This works. This is a great marriage.
So, we've definitely discovered that bigger board games are not good to take with you to a restaurant. Don't take big board games with you. Pocket-sized games are great. So, Love Letter was great at the time. This is like, I wouldn't say like 6 or 7 years ago. But Love Letter, Gold Thief, like those kinds of games that were small enough to carry around were great. Just because, like, when the food gets here, you could just clean everything up or like move it to a
Right.
side. um, and I would say, like, because we were living in Manhattan at the time, there wasn't a lot of space at the restaurants either. So usually you'd have to find, like, a smaller game to play among, like, two or four, or 5 or 6 people. So trying to find like a place that has large tables also became an issue. So I would say we ended up playing a lot at a Panera just because the Panera tables were really big. But the best food, I would say, is at Korea. So Korea is a spot. I think it's down by like near the NYU area, so it's like way downtown, and the tables are tiny, but the food is really good. So if you can like go to a coffee shop, play your game there, and then go to Korea, that would be like the best experience.
You know, it's funny. We kind of laugh a little bit at the Panera and things, but that's kind of almost where my rebirth of gaming kind of started because like my friends and I we go out to dinner on Friday nights, and then we'd end up at a Starbucks, and sometimes it was like a Starbucks, sometimes it was one inside a Barnes and Noble. And we used to take over the coffee area and we would just play games like I would bring a bag and we'd play the game of the night. And yes, size is definitely an issue. Like Survive was probably pushing it on those little tables.
Yeah, definitely. I think even now, there's a game play testing group that happens over in at the Whole Foods downtown, because the Whole Foods there is massive, and there's barely ever anyone at the dining area. So like
Right.
people can just take over those tables. I mean, maybe not right now because of the quarantine, but like, yeah, up to a
And
point, it was like a thing.
pre-queue times. Pre-queue times. Okay.
Yes.
Fair enough. So, you know, we've move on and forward a little bit, and number one is you have a lot of stuff going on in 2020. There's, seems to be like every month something's coming out that you're working on. Most notably, like I think before we get to the big one, like Scooby Doo, the Betrayal at House on the Hill version of, because there are two. Don't get the wrong one because you'll be a little disappointed if you're expecting Betrayal. I believe Betrayal at Mystery Mansion is what you're looking for. What did you do for that one? Did you get to write some of the stories? What was in that one?
Yeah, so for Betrayal at Mystery Mansion, I did a lot of the haunt writing. So it was
Hmm.
just like writing so they're called mysteries in this version, I believe, but
Okay.
in the regular Betrayal version, they're called haunts. And so each haunt is different, and as you're playing along, as you're flipping over the tiles and stuff, you can trigger a haunt, and that just like happens at random. And so once you get there, you have like a whole series of things that you can read from in the book. And Brian Neff and Noah Cohen and we did like a lot of development for that as well, along with Rob Davio.
Okay, cool. So, got Rob has to get his hands in there. He kind of has to be in all of them, right?
Yeah, yeah, he gets a last say.
We just started. I actually just talked about this with my interview with Elisa Teague because she did the writing for Widow's Walk. So, it's
Oh, nice.
it's funny how things are kind of seem to be circling around Betrayal and how we just started the Legacy version. So I'm curious to see how that goes. In the short little prelude, there's already something Rob threw in there that made me shake my fist at him. So, we're not even into it yet, and I'm already fist shaking. So,
Oh, Rob.
he's a true delight, that man. So, you also do a lot of RPG writing, right? So,
Mhm.
you did some work on, now is it just the Kids on Brooms that you did a lot of work for, or did you do any of the other ones in the series? Like, what have you done with that one?
Yeah, so I think it was the first Kids on Bikes. So it was Strange. Sorry, I keep calling it Stranger Things. It's not Stranger Things. Strange Adventures, Volume One.
Right, right.
So I did Dad's on Mowers for that, and then after that, Doug and I wrote a module together about a creepy boarding school, and then after that, as a joke, told him, "Hey, I want to write a trilogy, sort of like John Carpenter's trilogy um, of apocalypse movies, um, and they're all just going to be like things or people, like animals or people doing things on like modes of transportation." So the first one was grannies on scooters, and then after that, this was for Free Content Fridays, and then after that was I think it was doggos on skateboards, and then the one after that was anacondas on airliners.
So I envision one of those, pick your birth month, pick your birthday, and then that's what the name of the next Banana Chan module will be. So it'll be like,
Exactly.
yeah, like raccoons on, a big wheel. I don't know, that kind of.
Or it's like one of those autofill things on Google.
It's all Mad Libs at this point. Let's be
Oh yeah,
honest.
yeah, absolutely.
But you kind of breezed over the dads on lawnmowers because I think that one really kind of took kids on bikes and showed that not just it's not just Goonies, it's not just Stranger Things. It can be whatever, like it's a very malleable system. And
So I think around that time was when Dream Daddy just came out on Steam, and I was playing that, and I was a little bit of a fan of that. And as a joke, again, I asked Doug, "Hey, is it okay if I write this thing?" And he was like, "Sure, do it." And I did it.
Interesting. And then, I mean, Spencer's story will be similar for Kids on Brooms because he took Kids on Bikes and adapted it to kind of become like a Hogwarts based kind of thing. And then,
Mm-hmm.
later got back with them and kind of evolved it again. So it's really interesting to see this system take on so many new lives. I think it's very cool. So
Yeah, absolutely.
So fast forward yet again, and now we are in like the latter half of 2020, and you came up with an RPG that is very unique in its flavor, and I use the word flavor specifically because it's called Jiangxi. Am I saying that right?
Yes, Jiangxi or Jiangshi, either one.
Okay. I'm gonna let you tell it because I don't want to. I don't want to mess it up because I think it's such a very interesting concept that I think it sounds like a fun world to play in. So I'll let you tell us about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Jiangshi Blend, the Banquet Hall, is it's a tabletop role playing game that has a GM, and players take on the roles of a Chinese family, a Chinese immigrant family who's running in the 1920s. And in the daytime, they're faced with oppression and all the stress of like having to deal with the chores and like making sure that the restaurant runs smoothly. Whereas at night, all of these stresses and like all of the oppression. It manifests into this physical, which is the Jiangshi, the hopping vampires that attack everyone. So the family has to be resilient and survive the night and survive like all these weird things that are thrown at them.
So is it played over like kind of one day? Is that kind of like you're playing like one day at a time and just trying to like dusk till dawn, try to make it through the night, right?
So I think initially, so Senfeng Lim, who's also like a Renegade regular, we worked together on this game, and I think initially we wanted it to have like just one day, and then we were thinking, what if we just span it over several days? Make it harder and harder as we go. So like, you're rolling from a pool of dice,
Okay.
and with each day, you're taking away a die from the dice pool, so you're making it harder for the players. And I mean, the game's hard enough, but then to emulate all the stresses and all like the terrible things that are happening to you, we're just like making it longer. We're going to stretch it out, and also we realize that the story also like fits pretty well over a course of like several days, and that's definitely depending on the scenario that you play, but like most scenarios fit really well in the multi-day structure.
Right.
I would say like 5 days is the max amount of days that you want to play, 5 in-game days.
Right.
um, Not like 5 actual days, though you can if you want to drag it on for for multiple days if you want to do a campaign like that.
Interesting. So what was kind of the impetus to do, I mean, where did that come from? Because I mean, it's we're so used to the tropes, right? Like there's obviously
Mm-hmm.
there's space tropes, there's the whole fantasy tropes and everything like that. But then this one's actually turn of the century reality is kind of maybe alternate reality, true, but
Mm-hmm.
it's a very unique theme. So where did that really kind of come from, and was it first?
So I think Sen and so we met sometime in 2018, and I had always wanted to work with him. Like he's just like, phenomenal with all of the games that he's produced. And so when we were trying to come up with like a game idea, we have this massive Google document where we're just like throwing ideas at each other and like brainstorming things. And one thing that to both of us was that we really wanted to do something that's based around our culture and our identities and our experiences.
Hmm.
Mostly because like a lot of the games that we see now that have like Asian themes or Chinese themes, they're not necessarily like the best in terms of representation.
Okay.
And so we wanted something that was like that represented us in the way that we wanted to be represented. So we decided to use, the theme of the Chinese restaurant, mostly because like even though like Sen and I, we both haven't, we're not from restaurant families. We know a lot of people who are from restaurant families, like a
Sure.
lot of our friends, and even one of the consultants that is like a restaurant consultant on the game. I went to elementary school with her in Hong Kong, and so like we had all these friends who had these experiences, and we're also like growing up, like a lot of the time you go to banquets, and that's like a thing that happens like every time there's a special occasion. That's where like the majority of like the big events happen. Like you go to a Chinese restaurant, and you like gather and eat food, and like even on Sundays you would go for dim sum with like your. So that's why it was like an important thing for us. to use that setting. The 1920s was because, that was a time when the Chinese Exclusion Act was a thing.
Okay.
And a lot of people think of like the 1920s as like this glamorous era when it wasn't really for, a lot of color, unfortunately. So we decided to use that time, but it was a little later after the Chinese Exclusion Act actually, and all the different acts and like the legislation, the legislative stuff like happened, so that it's a thing that's been around for a while already, since like the late 18 yeah, it was the late 1800s, and then up until like the
Hmm.
1920s. That's like, the history that's already built in for this game. So we
Interesting.
want to use that time just because, we want to share a little bit of our history.
Oof. And I tell you what, as a chef, I got to spend a couple months working in a Chinese outlet that we had, and that's no joke. That's a lot of work. Just standing over the open fire of that wok all day is just intense. And I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
struggled with a month or two. I don't know how people struggle with a lifetime of it. I guess you get used to it, but still, it's even
Yeah.
in restaurant life, that's not an easy one.
Yeah, it's definitely a very intense situation. And it's
Yeah.
definitely not for, I would say, like, through learning about like all the stuff for this game, and like hiring on consultants and like talking to people and their experiences, it was definitely like, this is all you had. Like, for, like a lot of the kids that we talked to that are not all adults, like
Hmm.
when they were growing up, the restaurant was basically like what they would do day in day out. Like, yes, you would go to school, yes, you would, like, have all these other things that are happening, but the restaurant was like, your bread and butter.
Yeah. It's interesting how it, and you don't really realize how like somebody's entire culture can be like around that, but families and everything that run these, it's that whole unit is involved. So how can you
Mm-hmm.
not have it be a huge chunk of that culture? And I love that you
Right,
took,
yeah.
like you said, like, hey, we understand this, we can write a game about it. You that wasn't enough for you. You wanted to actually make sure that you had real information, which is pretty, that's awesome. And I obviously wish more people would do that rather than just write write silliness. And
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, even
yeah,
though it's like, our own stuff and like our own background, it's
right.
still important to us to make sure that we get it right.
So it makes me think, like, is there a sequel to that? Is there a perhaps another culture you'd maybe like to deep dive on? Maybe go to some of the other cultures that people might not understand as well, or even see the difference of,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. So with this game, we realized when we were doing playtesting was that um, a lot of the players that came from immigrant families, uh, they also sort of, and they weren't necessarily Chinese, they also felt like, wow, this is like a really impactful thing for me.
Hmm.
And I think that goes to show that like the mechanics really suits the theme. So we realized that, because it's making such a large impact to like, a lot of people from immigrant families, to like other writers. So for the scenario writers, we have a few that are actually not just Chinese based adventures. So we have a Haitian American writer who's writing, Carl Pierre Lewis, who's writing a Haitian American family. And we also have I believe, a Japanese American experience that's being written in,
Oh, cool.
and I think that is already done, and that's already put in there. Yoshi Creelman did the scenario for that, um, and yeah, it's just been like, incredible, just trying to get other people's perspectives, like seeing what they're.
It is. It's interesting, and I think that we can use it as a tool to learn and understand. And so that just wrapped up on Kickstarter not that
Mhm.
long ago. And congratulations, it
Thank
did
you.
very well. And when do you expect like that to be able to kind of start hitting the shores roughly?
Version is we're hoping for that to be done by December, if not sooner. And the physical version, we're hoping to get shipped out to everyone by the end of Q1 2021.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Awesome.
so
Very
pretty
cool.
soon.
Yeah, exactly. That's not too far. Um, yeah, that's actually really quick when you think about it. So what other great things do you have on the horizon? I mean, that sounds like a lot. We've talked about a lot, and I'm sure there's more to talk about. So what's new and what's coming that, maybe you might want to let us know about, or
Oh gosh. Yeah, there's a lot.
can let us know about, I guess.
So I am working on some stuff with Renegade Games. We're
Well,
doing
cool.
a thing that
Doing
I
the
don't
thing.
think I can talk about just yet, but we are doing a thing. I'm also working with Austin Knight, who is a who's a therapist by day, but a game designer,
Hmm.
games writer by night. So uh, that's really exciting for me. And also working with Eric Yurko on a small project. Um, what else am I working on? Oh, Dune. So I wrote a little bit for Dune, the RPG, and I think we're going to hear some announcements about that eventually, but I can't say too much about it. So
That's pretty cool, though.
that's
I
also a
mean,
thing. Yeah.
yeah. So we're keeping you busy. So we're trying to make sure that you have lots of things to do. We're excited to see. I believe the storytelling panel is going to be fun because we have you and Elise are sitting in on that. It's going to be very interesting to kind of get people who craft story for a living to kind of dive into how they do that, because that's got to be amazing.
I think this is going to be my first time meeting Elise,
Oh,
or
awesome.
at least in the same panel together.
There you go. Yeah, that we'll call that meeting nowadays because that's
Yeah.
that's meeting in 2020. So that's completely fine. So this has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate getting to know you. I think this has been incredible. I think the stuff that you do is very cool, and I just when you guys look at the book names on Athenaeum, trust me, you'll smile a little bit. This is who you want to thank for that.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. So thanks for watching. Be sure to check out that panel and that interview, and we'll see you next time for the next one. Enjoy the rest of your convention.